At first glance, it looks like an ordinary car. Beautiful, yes. Powerful, certainly. But open the glove compartment, and you'll find a bottle of Arpège by Lanvin, factory-fitted, standard equipment. Welcome to the 1957 Cadillac Eldorado Brougham, the car that came with Perfume. This was not a joke. This was not a marketing gimmick. This was what Cadillac believed luxury meant in 1957, and it was just the beginning. Let's start with something that will make you look twice. The 1958 Buick Limited wore what the industry called Dagmar bumpers, large, bullet-shaped chrome protrusions at the front, named after a 1950s television personality known for her, shall we say, dramatic silhouette. They offered no performance benefit whatsoever. They were the invention of Harley Earl, GM's first vice president of design, the man who invented the concept car and who held over 50 design patents in his lifetime. Earl was obsessed with jet fighters. His reference for the Dagmar shape was the nose cone of the F-86 Sabre, the US Air Force's frontline jet in the Korean War. He put a fighter jet's nose on the front of a family sedan. And it worked. Safety regulations made them impossible. A pointy bumper and a pedestrian don't mix. By 1960, they were gone. But for one glorious moment, the Buick Limited drove down the street like it was daring you to get in its way. Back to our friend the Brougham. The 1957 Cadillac Eldorado Brougham cost more than a Rolls-Royce when it launched, so Cadillac decided it needed to feel like one. The glove compartment came fitted with a curated selection of luxury items: a vanity mirror, a cigarette case, a tissue dispenser, and a factory-installed vial of Arpège by Lanvin, one of the most expensive perfumes in the world. Standard equipment on every car. Today, automakers spend billions on ambient lighting and massage seats. Nobody has put perfume back in the glove compartment. Perhaps they should. In 1960, while most car designers were integrating headlights smoothly into the body, Chrysler went the other direction entirely. The Imperial's headlights floated in chrome pods, completely detached from the bodywork. Inspired by designer Virgil Exner's forward look philosophy, the idea that a car should look like it was moving even when standing still. The pods added weight. They were difficult to clean. They collected dirt in places a cloth could never reach. They also looked like something from a science fiction film. Evolving safety standards ended them by 1964. No automaker has tried them since. The name is dramatic. The reality was actually rather elegant. Rear hinged doors, doors that open from the back rather than the front, had existed since the earliest days of the automobile. They fell out of favor because, if they opened at speed, the wind would catch them and fling them wide. Engineers called them suicide doors. Lincoln brought them back for the 1961 Continental. Not for danger, for elegance. In a chauffeur-driven car, rear-hinged doors allow a passenger to step out without ducking or twisting. You simply emerge. President Kennedy was riding in a Lincoln Continental on November 22, 1963. By the late 1960s, the doors were phased out again. They appear today only in ultra-limited editions, always with a story attached. This one was not subtle. The 1970 Plymouth Superbird arrived on public roads with a pointed aerodynamic nose cone extending nearly 2 feet beyond the bumper, and a 19-inch rear wing mounted on two metal stanchions above the trunk. It was built for one reason: to dominate NASCAR at Daytona and Talladega, where speeds exceeded 200 miles per hour. The aerodynamic package was developed by Chrysler engineer John Pointer, working with the racing division. Wind tunnel tests showed the nose cone reduced drag by 28%. The rear wing, mounted deliberately high above the turbulent air off the roofline, generated enough downforce to keep the car stable at 200 mm. Chrysler filed a patent on the aerodynamic body configuration in 1969. The rules required manufacturers to produce at least 1,500 road cars to homologate a race car. Plymouth built 1,171. On the road, the nose cone made parking a challenge. The wing blocked the rearview mirror. Neighbors either loved it or called the police. When NASCAR changed its rules the following year, the Superbird had no reason to exist. It was discontinued after one model year. Today, an original Superbird sells for over $200,000. The 1954 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing is one of the most beautiful cars ever built. It is also one of the most difficult to get into. The Gullwing doors open upward. Spectacular. But the sills are enormous, the seats are fixed, and once you're inside, the steering wheel is directly in front of you. Mercedes solved this with a tilt-forward steering column. The mechanism was designed by Rudolf Uhlenhaut, Mercedes' chief engineer, and the man personally responsible for the entire 300 SL program. Uhlenhaut was so fast a driver that he could lap the Nürburgring faster than most professional racing drivers of his era, in the company's own test cars. He designed the tilt column himself, patented it, and considered it one of the more elegant engineering solutions of his career. The entire wheel and column swung forward on a hinge, allowing the driver to lower themselves in before swinging the wheel back into place. When adjustable steering columns became standard across the industry, this elegant workaround became unnecessary. The 300 SL's swing-away wheel is remembered today as a beautiful solution to a problem that no longer exists. Malcolm Bricklin was a Canadian entrepreneur who believed he could build the world's safest sports car. He called it the SV1, Safety Vehicle 1. Bricklin filed patents on two genuinely novel ideas: a body made entirely from acrylic and fiberglass, no steel, designed to absorb impact without crumpling, and the hydraulic door system that would become his undoing. The acrylic body patent was legitimate and ahead of its time. Modern composite body cars trace a direct line to what Bricklin proposed in 1974. The doors were hydraulic gullwings, dramatic, yes, but also engineered so they couldn't swing into traffic. The hydraulics were designed to prevent accidental closure. In practice, the system was underpowered. In cold weather, the doors opened slowly, very slowly. Sometimes they didn't open at all. Bricklin's company went bankrupt in 1975, the same year the car launched. Around 2,900 were built. Production ended immediately. The gullwing door survived. The Mercedes SLS and Tesla Model X both used them. Bricklin's hydraulic system did not. The Volkswagen Thing began life as a military vehicle, the Type 181, designed for the German Bundeswehr. The brief went to VW engineer Hans Mersheimer in 1968. Build something simpler than a Jeep, cheaper than a Land Rover, and serviceable by a conscript with a basic toolkit. Mersheimer's solution was radical in its honesty. Every panel flat or simply curved for cheap stamping, every component accessible without special tools, every non-essential feature simply absent. When it entered civilian production, Volkswagen kept the military features that made no sense for civilian life. The doors lifted completely off, the windshield folded flat, the canvas roof removed entirely. You could reduce the car to 4 wheels, a frame, and an engine in approximately 20 minutes. It was sold in America for exactly 2 years, 1973 and 1974, before safety regulations made it impossible to continue. The thing had no crash protection worth speaking of. In a collision, there was nothing between the occupant and the road. It was, however, the most cheerfully honest automobile ever built. It didn't pretend to be anything other than what it was. Saab was always different. Founded by aircraft engineers in 1945, the company approached car design with a pilot's logic. The center-mounted ignition was the idea of engineer Gunnar Ljungström, who spent his career designing aircraft cockpits before moving to cars. In a cockpit, controls are placed where they cause least damage in a crash and where they can be reached without looking. Ljungström applied the same principle to the car. Center console, between the seats, lock the transmission, 1 patent, 1 decision, 30 years of Saab identity. The ignition switch on the Saab 900 was not on the steering column. It was placed on the center console, between the seats, where Saab engineers argued it was safer in a frontal collision and where it locked the transmission as an anti-theft measure. This feature appeared on Saab models from the 1970s onward. It became a trademark of the brand. When Saab ceased production in 2012, the center-mounted ignition went with it. No other manufacturer ever adopted it. Push-button start has made ignition location almost irrelevant. But for anyone who drove a Saab, the muscle memory of reaching between the seats never quite goes away. Every one of these features disappeared for a reason. Safety regulations, production costs, practicality, common sense. And yet, look at a modern car, clean, efficient, safe, remarkably similar to every other modern car. The 1957 Cadillac Eldorado came with Perfume. The 1970 Plymouth Superbird came with a wing taller than most people. The Volkswagen thing came with no doors at all. They were impractical. Some were dangerous. Most were completely absurd. But they were invented by engineers who were given a brief and decided to do something genuinely different. The wheel keeps turning. Standards keep rising. And somewhere, in a design studio right now, someone is sketching something that will look completely reasonable to them and completely insane to everyone else. That's where the next great car always comes from.